girl, you are so pretty, 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 pretty. Baby girl, you are so pretty, 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 pretty. Females made you just to trick me, trick me, trick me, trick me.
Hi, if you are seeing this, it means my book, Everything Was Here But You, is out now. This book touches on love, loss, grief, and the weird feeling that something is missing when you're building your beautiful, big, accomplished dream life. Check it out now. I'm sure you will find something in this book that you can relate to, and I hope it feels like a huge hug. You can get it now on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. Mwah! Hi everyone, welcome back to Take Care of Your Body by Rye. I'm your host, Rylan Rosano, and I'm so beyond glad you're here clicking on this episode today. I hope you're having an amazing day, evening, or morning whenever you're listening to this. And I hope you know how loved and appreciated you are and how amazing it is that you clicked on my episode out of an act to do something for yourself today. So, before we begin, I wanted to talk about what today's episode is. It's what I've been thinking about recording for a while because it explains a feeling we all have been through within our lives, whether we know it or not. And a lot of people have encountered it but don't have the language for it. So, I wanted to bring it up today. It's called ambiguous loss. It's something that I do talk about in my second book, Everything Was Here But You, which I wrote about love, loss, becoming, and this weird feeling of you're growing and building this beautiful life, but it feels like something or someone is missing. You can get it today on Amazon for $9.99, but ambiguous loss is very complex. It's a weird feeling. So before I explain what ambiguous loss is, because you're probably like, what the heck are we talking about? What is that word? I do want to share publicly that I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, so I love learning about the science of how our minds work, but this episode isn't therapy or mental health advice. Think of it like a thoughtful conversation with your emotionally intelligent friend about something really human. Because sometimes the hardest thing in life are the losses that aren't really clear. So here we go. What is ambiguous loss? Ambiguous loss is very complicated, but it can easily be described as a concept of loss. So, the concept of ambiguous loss was introduced by a researcher named Pauline Boss, and it basically describes a type of loss where there is no real closure. The person or situation is gone in some way, but not fully, and because there's no clear ending, your brain doesn't know how to process it. If you've noticed, the human brain doesn't like endings. However, endings tend to let us know the movie is over. If something ends, it's okay, that ended, moving on. But when you're in an ambiguous loss situation, it's kind of like, okay, it's not over, but it's not active. What the heck do I do with either things? Because you're in the in between space of something that's extremely complicated. And because there's no clear ending, like I said, our brains don't know how to process it. Our brains like things that make sense: breakups, goodbyes, funerals, clear endings. But ambiguous loss is different. It's things like relationships that fade instead of ending, friendships that slowly will disappear, someone who once was important becoming a stranger, and loving someone who can't show up in the same way anymore. I've been through it. It's very confusing, which is why I wrote a whole book about it to help you all heal. um, but the relationship changes, but the emotional connection doesn't always disappear overnight. And that can feel extremely confusing, extremely like, well, what the heck do I do now? Because again, you have so much love for this person, but nowhere to put it because the relationship's not active, but it's not really over. So it's not like, oh, they suck. It had to end for this and that reason. It just kind of happened over time. So I always say grief, love without a place to go is grief, and grief is horrible because if you don't handle your grief properly, it will turn into anger. And like I was talking to my therapist this morning, it's really horrible when a person was really beautiful in your life and really kind towards you, and your brain wants to almost trick it into thinking, oh, this person sucked. That's why the relationship ended. Because a coping for ambiguous loss is often turning the person into a villain because the story doesn't have an ending. So maybe you can come up with one. Okay, this person was horrible and mean. Next. But it's almost like doing a disservice to yourself and the relationship if the person was very formative for you to turn them into a villain, because that's not the right story, and we're honest here and authentic, and we want to be open about what actually happened, even if it sucked and the person had to leave our life. Sometimes the best choice of, what was that is it was something beautiful that ended, but the fact that it began means that it meant something. Because beautiful things sometimes do come to an end, but they're often beautiful things for a reason. And I think thinking about it like that is honestly my favorite thing, and often thinking about it this way as well. I feel like when a relationship or something ends, we forget that we are contributing to the relationship. So that friendship, that relationship, that connection, whatever it was, could not have been that powerful and magical if you were not a part of it. You were adding your own positivity, your own attributes, your own light and love to that connection. And I'm sure the other person was amazing, but you brought something to that connection. So you will bring something again to the next one when you are in the place to find another friend or relationship or whatever. But again, don't rush yourself to be ready for a new connection, especially if you're healing from an ambiguous loss situation. I've often learned it's extremely complicated, and it's weird because, again, you have so much love for someone that's not really in your life, but not really gone. So, why is ambiguous loss so hard? I've come to learn from personal experience and studying it. One of the reasons why ambiguous loss is challenging and heavy is because our brains are wired for closure. When someone dies, it's horrible, it's heartbreaking, it sucks, but it's amazing to be able to see, okay, grandma or grandpa or my aunt or whoever passed away is going into this beautiful casket, and they're going underground, and they're going to be stored there, and then their body is going to go to heaven, their soul is going to go to heaven or wherever you believe, right? Like, funerals are beautiful because they're giving you closure, and they're also showing you like there's a new way to live your life after it's gone, there's an afterlife, or there's heaven, or there's something beautiful. And I think it's really a beautiful thing to be able to see, because your brain is in a way comprehending, okay, this person passed away, I can carry on their legacy, but that's my closure. You're seeing someone disappear almost, right? So someone's going in the casket, that's the closure. End of story, wrapped up, right? Or when you watch a movie, like, I feel like we all get attached to stories, etc. I don't know about you, I love movies. I become a part of it for that hour or 2 hours, however long it's going. When the movie ends, that's your closure. That was the end of the story. You can rewatch the movie. It's beautiful. You can rewatch it as many times as you want, but the end of the movie is your closure. The story ended there, right? So, in this ambiguous loss situation, there is not really a beginning, middle, or an end. Well, there is a beginning and a middle, but there's not really an end. It's not like, okay, it starts here, here's the middle, here's the end. It starts here, here's the middle. Oh, it got complicated. You know what I mean? And our brains love to organize closure in that beginning, middle, and end format for stories. So, ambiguous loss is a story where the last chapter is missing. And when that happens, the brain tends to do something interesting. It tries to solve the story itself. You might replay conversations, you might reread messages and ruminate on that. You might ask yourself questions like, did it mean as much to them as it did to me? And none of those questions necessarily have answers, which is why ambiguous loss can linger longer than other kinds of loss. And something that I've also noticed is when you are in the process of navigating ambiguous loss or any form of loss, it is best to let yourself grieve instead of pushing those feelings aside. It's healthier to feel your feelings, even if the logistics weren't as amazing as you want them to be, even if maybe it was only a person you talked to on your phone and you never met in person. That is still a connection. And something we don't talk about enough in the modern age of, it's 2026, we have our phones, we have amazing people we meet on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all these places. Anytime you are connecting and sharing emotion and sharing feelings and ideas, any form of relationship, no matter the capacity or the logistics, is still a relationship. And if that ends, you need to grieve it as if it was important to you, because it is. It is important to you. It is a relationship. And any kind of relationship, no matter the specifics, is going to, take a toll on you when it ends, because it was someone you grew close to and someone you became attached to and someone you shared parts of yourself with during a period of time. And it does not matter if it was an in-person person or only online. That is still a connection you need to give yourself time to grieve and not rush over, because any form of loss is hard and challenging and really will play a role in sometimes how you see yourself. And you need to be gentle and kind to yourself because something meaningful ended, and you need to grieve it like a breakup because that's what it is. So the human side of it, which I love because we're all humans, unless you're a robot and I just didn't know. Um, the human side of it is often like something I've realized is that ambiguous loss isn't just about relationships. It can show up in so many places in life. It can look like growing apart from someone you once loved, right? Or becoming a different version of yourself, leaving behind a chapter of your life and realizing maybe someone you care about can't meet you where you are. But what's beautiful about it is often these moments don't always come with dramatic endings. Sometimes they just quietly shift. And one day you wake up and realize something that used to be a part of your life isn't there in the same way anymore. But the beautiful side of that is no matter if something is missing, you will still be there. And again, it goes back to you are a part of that story. You are what makes it so beautiful in the first place because you add to that relationship. And again, if someone leaves your life, you are still there and you're amazing. And there is what? 7 billion people on this earth who will love you and be happily able to show up for you in your life. I mean, still, that doesn't cancel out the ambiguous loss and the missing that you probably have for the other person, but it will help you realize like you are amazing. That person didn't give you those traits that you have. You are the one who had the loving and beautiful characteristics. So, again, you brought that into the story. So, if anyone is dealing with ambiguous loss or any form of loss, I am sending you so much hugs and love today. It's very complicated and confusing. And just know it's okay if you lose your crap and cry and hear a song and miss your person and realize you can't text them or whatever it may be, whatever circumstance you're in. But please be gentle with yourself and take care of your mind and body. It really is so important to make sure that you are giving yourself love and compassion. And even if it's hard and maybe you mess up, it's important to, again, be kind to yourself because you're with you for your entire life. So have compassion for yourself, give yourself some love, and realize you're doing the best you can in a really confusing, complicated situation. So, what helps? One of the most healing things about ambiguous loss is simply having language for it. Because once you can name something, it stops feeling like you're crazy for feeling it. So, hopefully, this episode just made you laugh and realize, like, oh, wow, that's a real thing. Um, so, it just means you're human if you're experiencing this. Another thing that helps is understanding that closure always, doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes closure comes from how we decide to carry the experience forward. And, maybe the relationship taught you something about yourself. Maybe it showed you the kind of love you want. Maybe it showed you your capacity to love. Maybe it helped you discover parts of yourself you haven't met before. Sometimes the meaning of something isn't how it ended, sometimes the meaning is how it changed you. So, again, if you're listening to this and you're in the middle of something that feels unresolved, confusing, or unfinished, I want to let you know that it's okay for feelings to be complicated. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can appreciate what something meant and still accept that it's different now. Those two things can exist at the same time. So I want to add a little bit more of scientific facts into this and a little fun Q&A moment. So to dive into that, Lilo's my assistant today. Dogs really help you also get through ambiguous loss. It's just like a known fact if anyone was wondering. So you can also feel free to get another puppy if you're listening to this. I really recommend. Dogs help you get through anything though. Okay, so here's my science section. Something interesting about ambiguous loss from a psychological perspective is that our brains actually struggle with uncertainty more than clear pain. If you didn't know, emotional pain can be almost as severe as physical pain. You can be experiencing heartbreak, and it can be the same amount of stress as a heart attack is on the human body. If you didn't know, you can look that up. It is scientific backed. Um, Research in neuroscience shows the brain's threat detection system, especially the amygdala, becomes more activated when something is uncertain or unpredictable. In simple terms, when our brain doesn't have answers, it keeps scanning for them. Again, like I said, you're going to replay conversations, reread text, remember phone calls, suddenly go look through your journals, call your friends, be like, what did this person say to me? Reanalyze, because oftentimes, if you don't have closure, if you don't have, okay, this was the point where it went sideways, your brain is going to try and find it. It's not because you or someone in this position is obsessing, it's because the brain is trying to solve an incomplete emotional puzzle. There's also research suggesting that unresolved relational experiences activate similar neural pathways to social rejection, which the brain processes in a way that overlaps with physical pain, like I said. So when people say something like, that really hurt after a confusing relationship or friendship ended, that's not really just a metaphor. There are studies showing the brain regions activated during social rejection often overlap with regions involved in physical pain processing. Isn't that crazy how that works? Which often explains why ambiguous loss can feel so intense, even if the situation technically ended a long time ago. I also do want to point out it does not matter the time frame of a situation or experience, something will affect you for as long as it needs to affect you, and you're not supposed to heal based on a calendar date. Healing comes when you decide you are ready for a new experience, a new person in your life, a new chapter. Do not rush yourself to get there because you quote unquote feel like you should because it's been 6 months. That's not how it goes. um, Another psychological concept related to ambiguous loss that I love is something called cognitive closure. So, humans, again, naturally seek cognitive closure because it helps us make sense of the world. We want to answer questions like, why did this happen? What did it mean? Was it real? But ambiguous loss challenges the need for that closure. And sometimes the healing process becomes learning how to live without every answer, which is so hard. It's so hard. I like to figure stuff out and give it a meaning and give it an answer, but sometimes there is no answer. But that does not mean ignoring the experience. It often means understanding that not every story has a perfectly explained ending. This is what I love about writing. I'm going to give you two little Rylan tidbits. So, I love writing because even if a person leaves your life, a story changes shape, a situation ends or shifts, when you write something down, you're creating this beautiful time capsule of pretty much saying, this person mattered. This mattered enough for me to write about it. I'm going to freeze it in this moment of time so I can look back on it and reflect and realize this person, this circumstance, this experience mattered enough to me that it's going to be documented forever for me to look back and read at, which I think is so beautiful. It's really beautiful to have something in your life come in and change the way you see yourself and see the world. I think that's what's so amazing about other people is they often can be a mirror for us and show us what we need to see within ourselves. And when they leave, it's a little bit challenging because if that person was giving you all this affirmation and all of this validation, when they leave, you're almost like, well, crap, now I have to give it to myself, which is why I sometimes think ambiguous loss and any form of loss is hard because you're really living your life without someone who added so much to it in it anymore. But also, you have to remember, are you missing the person or are you missing the feeling they gave you? You have to think about that too because both things truly can be true at once. Okay, I want to do a little Q&A moment because I did get some questions on the podcast about some of these, so I wanted to bring them up. Here we go. You ready? And these are also some common questions that come up that I did find, but some of you guys did give me good Q&A for this, so I'm excited. They're going to be juicy. Here we go. If something didn't have closure, does that mean I should reach out to the person? This hits home. Oh my God. Not necessarily. Closure doesn't always come from another person explaining themselves. Sometimes closure comes from understanding your own experience and recognizing the relationship still had meaning, even if it changed. I often think we want this other person to simply be like, I'm so sorry, whatever. But honestly, like I always think about it like this. How many times are you going to let someone else tell you that they don't want you in your life? In your life, or how often, how like many times do you want them to say like how often like they can't show up or they can't be available for you? Like how many times can you hear the same person say the same thing in different languages? I often think as humans, like it's really hard for us to hear like I'm not in the place for a relationship. I'm not available because we tend to still want people like that. Oftentimes, people who haven't done their healing work don't be attached to emotionally unavailable people. And if you are, find a therapist. I'm kidding, but I'm not. Um, Oftentimes if someone says that, if someone tells you you can't do something, you can't have candy, what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to go eat candy. So if someone says I'm not available, I'm not in the place for a relationship, you're going to tend to be like, that's okay, let me try and make you available and make you in the place for a relationship. You're going to test that boundary almost. So it's like, think about it like this. Like, if you reach out to this person, are you going to be okay with whatever outcome happens? If they don't reply, if they do reply harshly, or if it's not what you want. Second, again, how many times can you hear the same person tell you the same thing? I don't want a relationship with you. I can't do this. I can't show up for you. That's going to hurt to hear multiple times. And again, if you do reach out to this person, make sure you're in a more neutral state where it's more of like sending you love, generalized. It's not like, I want you back. Please come back to my life. You don't want to beg someone again to be in your life. If you're doing it, do it without any certain outcome. Why do I still think about someone even if the relationship ended a long time ago? This question, again, it's pretty normal. When a relationship ends without clear resolution, the brain sometimes keeps revisiting it because it never got a complete narrative. Over time, though, these thoughts usually shift from emotional pain to something more like memory or reflection, which is really, really beautiful to think about. And it is something that I do, again, talk about in my book, Everything Was Here But You. I think sometimes relationships can end like movies or even like a funeral. You might not get the closure, but you still have to create the ending yourself. And sometimes that's the most powerful. Can ambiguous loss still teach us something positive? Yes, absolutely. This question really ties into something positive about this really confusing psychological phenomenon. Some of the most meaningful personal growth often comes from ambiguous loss experiences that really don't go the way we expected. If a relationship doesn't go the way you want it to, and it does turn into this ambiguous loss situation, you are going to learn something about yourself because anytime a relationship doesn't go the way you want, you do still take away a lesson. I always say it's forever or it's a lesson. Like that's how I view things in life, but also I do things intentionally. If it won't matter in 5 years, I'm not going to give it 5 minutes. And when I say that, I don't mean, oh my God, if in 5 years I'm not going to be with this person or I'm going to have this outcome. No, I mean, in 5 years, I want to look at this and be okay with how it went down. Know it was meaningful. Know I was, doing something good for myself, knowing that it taught me something. Even if it's not going to last 5 years, I want to make sure it's intentional enough that it shaped me in some way and added to my life instead of took away something. But going back to this question, ambiguous loss can teach us, what kind of love we value, what kind of relationships feel healthy, and how we show up emotionally. And sometimes it helps us discover strengths in ourselves we didn't know were there, which is so beautiful, truly. So, back to the reflection side of things. While ambiguous loss can feel confusing and emotional, it's also a reminder that human relationships are complicated and, not every connection in our life is meant to last forever, and that's okay. Sometimes the meaning will last forever, but the person won't. And it doesn't mean the connection didn't matter. Sometimes people enter our lives for a period of time and help us become a different version of ourselves. And that growth stays with us long after the relationship changes, which is truly so beyond beautiful if you think about it. So, again, to close this out, I want to remind you that life rarely unfolds in these perfectly tied up chapters. Some stories end softly, some relationships shift, some connections leave a mark on us, again, long after they change. And ambiguous loss reminds us that love, growth, and memory don't always disappear just because something looks different than it once did. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is carry the lesson forward and keep becoming the person we're meant to become. Again, thank you so much for listening and joining me today on Take Care Your Body by Rye and diving into this psychological phenomenon. If you never learned what ambiguous loss is, now you know. I hope you don't ever go through it, but if you do go through it, just know you can find me on Instagram at Rylan Rosie. So it's RYLIN ROSEE. My podcast Instagram is Take Care by RY. The podcast is Take Care Your Body by Rye. It's on all podcasting platforms. You can find both my books, Once Upon a Time, I Survived Myself, which is a healing guide for anyone who's been through anything hard, heartbreak, love, loss, life changes, growing up too fast, chronic illness, anything like that, mental health struggles, that's your jam. It's on Amazon for $9.99 and barnesandnoble.com. Everything Was Here But You, my new second book, touches on love, loss, ambiguous loss, building a beautiful life where someone or something that you wanted is no longer a part of it. That is very relatable. It's on Amazon for $9.99. And again, I'm here. You're doing better than you know. I love you and I'm proud of you. Mwah. Take care.